Hey everyone, welcome to the second installment of my Best of 2022 series, and this is the best makeup of 2022. I spent a lot of time trying to curate this list and trying to think about if I should focus on 2022 releases or holy grails or, what the theme should be. But basically this is simple. It's just stuff I reached for a lot and that I used a lot and that I liked. There definitely are a lot of newer releases on here, and it's been a big year for the beauty industry and for releasing lots of new products, but there are some longtime favorites in here as well, so you'll see that for sure. Everything I discuss will be linked below, of course, and I will also try to cut in as much footage as I can, just B-roll of applications, swatches, anything I have in my archive, essentially, of filmed footage, so you can see what these products look like. I've definitely used pretty much all of these on my channel or on my other socials at some point. So in 2022, I became a primer girl, and this is shocking to me. It's still shocking to me because I've always said skincare is your best primer, and I totally agree with that, but I think the needs that I have for my makeup have changed, my skin type has changed a little bit, and so there were a few different primers throughout different seasons of the year that I really leaned on, and there are three standouts, and they're all very different from each other. The first primer I have to mention is the most expensive product of all. It might be the most expensive product on this list, and it's the Sisley Double Tenseur Primer. This is not a new product on the market. It has a cult following for a reason. It's a very thin gel primer that creates a bit of tackiness and grippiness on the skin while giving you the most beautiful, smooth, luminous, glass-like skin. It's a little bit like Milk Makeup's Hydro Grip Primer, but slightly thinner in texture, a little bit more serum-y than Hydro Grip. And for me, this is really the primer that started it all. I didn't think it would work for my skin type because I'm combo oily, and I started using this in the warmer seasons when my skin is oilier, but somehow it gives you luminosity and that kind of glassiness to the skin without adding more oil. It actually does the opposite. It holds makeup in place because of that grippy texture. It's very expensive. It's super bougie, but you really don't need a lot. I've used it a ton and I still think my bottle is about half full. So I just want to say I do really love this. If you're looking for a more affordable alternative than this, Milk Makeup Hydro Grip has a similar concept to it. The next makeup primer will be no surprise to you. It's the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Balm Powder. I still don't know what this is called. Blurring Balm Powder in the shade Universal. I fell head over heels in love with this primer very quickly because it came into my life at just the right time. This summer I felt really oily and nothing was keeping my makeup and the shine control in place throughout the day. And this primer somehow does that without getting cakey and without overly mattifying. So it's a balm formula. You can see you can like scoop out little bits of it. You really don't need a lot of this. And I think that's really the trick to this product, is to use just the tiniest amount to cover the skin without overdoing it. But it fills in the pores, it blurs the skin, it does mattify without going overboard, and it's also an amazing eye primer. It's so good at locking in eyeshadow. The one complaint I know people have is that it does smell kind of chemically, but that's because there's no additional fragrance in here. So you don't get any kind of scent or added artificial scent, which I actually appreciate. The final primer is one that I've really reached for a lot in the last quarter of the year. I tried it this summer. This is the Broad Spectrum SPF 30 sunscreen from Charlotte Tilbury Invisible UV Flawless Primer. This is an SPF primer, but I would not use it as my primary SPF. For me, I don't think I can get sufficient SPF protection with this as my only product. So I do my skincare, do my SPF, let it set, and then I go for this as a priming step. This is a lotiony consistency with some glow in the actual primer itself. So it adds a bit of glow, adds a bit of shine, nothing anywhere like Flawless Filter or a liquid illuminator or anything like that, but there is a nice glow to it, but it's also slightly pore filling, slightly blurring, not to the extent of the Danessa Myricks blurring powder, but it just smooths over any potential texture. And it also creates a slightly grippy base for makeup. So it's kind of like these two combined with a bit of luminosity. And when I tried it in the summer, I felt like it was a little bit too glowy for me. I liked the texture, but it was just too much. Now that it's winter and my skin is much more combo / normal, I've been reaching for it a ton, especially around the perimeter of my face. I actually used it today. Just across my cheekbones, across my forehead, and it just smooths out the skin and it adds a little extra SPF, it gives you a little bit of glow, and it just makes the skin look really beautiful. So between these 3 primers, that is my like primer arsenal right now. I kind of have everything I need, and these all do a different thing for a different need during a different season. But between these 3, I really feel like I'm covered. Let's talk about base makeup, so skin tints, foundations, all of that. I'm gonna try to keep it simple because I stand by all of my old favorites, my 2021 favorites. I still love and use all of them, honestly. But there are a couple new things that I wanted to highlight, starting with the least amount of coverage, and that is the Summer Fridays Sheer Skin Tint. This will be no surprise to you if you've watched my videos. I love this. It's very sheer, but not nothing. For example, I think the Glossier Skin Tint does nothing. For me, this does just the right amount of blurring, of taking down some redness. It's not gonna give you real coverage, but on an everyday basis, when I want my skin to look like skin, but maybe just a slightly nicer version of my skin, this is perfect. It's a serum-y texture, it's very fluid. I think you can hear it comes in this like shaky, squeezy tube. I wear the shades 3 and 4, but if I had to pick just one, I think 4 is a better match generally. I am wearing 3 right now in the winter though. I was very unsure whether this would work for my skin type because I am oily combo, but there's something about this that does have a film forming quality to it. So if you've used something like MAC Face and Body or other skin tints out there, the Rare Beauty skin tint does that, it kind of it sets down on the skin without setting down in finish. So it's going to still look luminous, but it actually stays in place and it kind of grips onto the skin throughout the day to the point where it has surprisingly long longevity for a skin tint. For higher coverage, I have a foundation that really surprised me and I cannot stop using it. I'm wearing it right now. It's the Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Foundation. This came out early this year in like January or something, and I did not actually try it until several months after, maybe like 6 months after that. So it was a mid-year discovery for me. I wear the shade 6N. This is a luminous foundation with medium coverage, and it's basically all I want, all I need on a coverage day. I don't like super high coverage. There are times where I need something more matte, but on a general day-to-day basis, this makes my skin look like real skin without looking cakey, without bunching up, without pilling or anything like that. It's very easy to apply and it does make the skin look beautiful. I don't know what else to say. It just gives you the right balance of luminosity and longevity. I also do have a full Charlotte Tilbury brand review on my channel, a whole dedicated video if you're curious to learn more about my thoughts on the brand. So there's high coverage, there's low coverage, and I actually have a stick foundation, and this also won't be a surprise to you. It's the Merit Stick Foundation in the shade Bisque. So Merit repackaged these and they actually included 1.7 times more product than they did in the past. And so this year they re-released them, but the price is the same, which is great. I love this because of its ease of use. I did a Merit brand review on my channel. You can look that up there, but you can swipe it on the skin and blend it out. It's one of the few stick foundations that I feel like I can do that without the product just sticking where I've swiped it. It doesn't break down throughout the day, even though there are obviously butters and oils in this holding it together in the stick form. It doesn't get greasy. And I also love that I can use this as a concealer or a foundation around my eyes, around spots on my face. It's just a very multi-purpose product. And again, this is the kind of product that is really consumer friendly. So it's easy to use. You really can't mess it up because you can blend it out with a brush or a sponge or your fingers. And I think that's really what the brand is all about. And that's why Merit's been so popular. Honestly, I think in terms of what my followers have purchased of my recommendations this year, Merit has been very, very up there because of their ease of use and their sleek minimalism. Let's talk about concealers. I feel like there were a lot of concealer releases this year, so I actually have quite a few to talk about. The first concealer that really took me by storm this year is the Dior Backstage Concealer. I love the Dior Backstage line. I love the foundation. It's one of my most repurchased of all time. And this concealer was a great addition. So it has the same sleek silicone packaging. The thing that really stood out to me first about this concealer is that it has a brush tip applicator. So it makes application control very easy. You can just paint on a small amount wherever you want. And this is a high coverage concealer, for me anyway. For me, it only takes a dot under the corner of my eye, inner corner, outer corner, and that's really all I need. I also love that it's very spreadable without losing coverage. So even though I just use a dot here and there, it spreads out and gives me enough coverage for day to day that's all I really need. But I can build up coverage very, very well if I want to. For me, this is like a great special event concealer if I'm going to an event, if I'm going to a wedding, something like that, because I know it's really gonna stay in place. It does set down to a matte finish, but it's not drying or cakey because it is pretty thin in consistency overall. My one pet peeve is that the tube itself, like around the applicator, when you twist it down, it starts to get product like that leaks out of the tube. It's a minor thing, but obviously this is a luxury product, a luxury brand, so I kind of hope that they fix that packaging. But other than that, the product, the applicator, it's all very, very good. The other concealer I've loved that has surprised me is Armani Luminous Silk Concealer. It surprises me because I swear by Armani Power Fabric Concealer. It's actually what I'm wearing right now. I've repurchased that probably like 6 or 7 times in my life. I use it for everything. I use it all over the face. It's like a perfect, stretchy, thin but high coverage concealer. You don't need a lot of it. But my skin has definitely started to change this year. Even though I'm oily, I'm more dehydrated in the winter. I found myself seeking actually less coverage. And that's why this has been so perfect. It's this chubby little applicator. It has the elegance of an Armani concealer as you'd expect. It has like a fluid, serum-y texture, but it gives me just enough medium coverage that I'm really happy with that throughout the day in my day-to-day life. And I've also used this all over the face, and sometimes that's all I do. I just like smear it on and go. It's a very middle of the road concealer in terms of finish, in that it's not matte, but it's not too luminous. It's just a very beautiful skin-like finish. I have a couple of honorable mentions. The Make Beauty concealer came out this year, and it's called the Skin Mimetic Concealer. This is another light medium coverage concealer that's been great for every day. It has a fluid consistency, even more fluid than the Armani Luminous Silk. And it's almost kind of watery, but in a nice way. I describe this as the skin tint of concealers. It has like a tint quality to it, but it's not gonna give you full coverage. It just looks really nice on like low makeup days. The other one that I've recently been reaching for a lot and really loving is kind of the opposite of this in texture. It's the Kulfi concealer, and this is the creamiest, richest concealer I've ever liked. It surprised me because it has a density to it and like this lotion-like consistency, but it's also really grippy. So it gives you coverage and it stays there. And even as you blend it out, it feels like it's really staying put on the skin, and it has surprisingly high coverage. I wear the shade Rose Rush, by the way. For covering spots, pigmentation, anything like that on the face, my favorite remains the same. It's the NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer. It just does everything I want it to. It gives me high coverage where I need it. I can use it to pinpoint conceal, and it still looks very skin-like. Moving into powders, I am oily, as I mentioned, so I definitely rely on powders, both setting powders, like loose powders, as well as pressed powders. I have 2 new setting powders, like loose translucent powders this year that I loved equally. The first one is the Fit Glow Beauty Blurring Bamboo Hyaluronic Loose Setting Powder. And this is a white powder, but it doesn't leave a white cast. It's very, very fine. I actually used it to set my T-zone today, and it does a great job of looking very thin on the skin, but it does mattify and holds my makeup in place, as well as blurs over the pores. The other powder is the Laura Mercier new Translucent Loose Setting Powder Ultra Blur in the shade Translucent. And honestly, I use these pretty interchangeably. I think the Fit Glow Beauty one might even be the tiniest bit more refined. For pressed powders, I have two different ones. The first one is the Chantecaille Perfect Blur Finishing Powder in the shade Light Medium. There's also a medium deep. This was a limited edition package, but the product is permanent. This is the best for blurring over the T-zone. So if you have any visible pores, if you want a slightly filtered look on the skin, this powder does it all. It's not the best for oil control or setting the makeup initially. I definitely use my loose powders for that, but I like this as a finishing powder or as a touch-up powder throughout the day because it just gives you that really like instantly smooth skin look. For something a little different, Make Beauty came out with their whole base makeup range this year, including the Diffusion Set Translucent Pressed Powder. I use the shade Medium. I love this compact. It's got this mixed metals, silver and gold, and it's a refillable package, like all of their compacts. This is very, very similar to the Charlotte Tilbury pressed powder. It gives you that perfected, softened, filtered look. It's not quite as pore filling as the blur powder, but it also has a little bit of a tint in it. So for me, this is a great touch-up powder if I feel like my makeup is fading somewhere, or it's also great for the under eyes. It actually adds a little bit of brightness for me because of this yellow undertone in this shade. This also comes in like 5 different tinted shades, which I think is fantastic. For setting sprays, there were 2 that I love this year. The first one is Drugstore. It's the Milani Make It Last setting spray. It holds makeup in place, it locks everything in, and it's affordable. The higher end version that I've been loving is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Setting Spray. This one has a much more refined mister, and I do feel like it's a little bit less shiny in finish. Sometimes I feel like when I use the Milani, I actually need to powder over it, and then it's like really locked in. This one, maybe because of the finer mist, doesn't disperse as much product, so I'm able to get a more controlled application. But honestly, these are both fantastic and they lock in your makeup all day long. We're gonna move into cheek products now, and I'm actually gonna start with contour. So I've only reached for cream contour this year, and this is not a category I experiment a lot in, but I have 2 favorites, and one is a winter favorite and one's a summer favorite. To be honest, I don't contour a ton. It's something that I do when I'm filming a video or if I have a special event, but in my everyday life, I'm not really contouring. But that's kind of why I like this one. So this is a newer favorite in the past like 3 or 4 months. It's the Danessa Myricks, what is this called? Balm Contour, and I wear the shade Medium 1. If you have an olive complexion, this shade is amazing because it has this caramel, yellow, olivey undertone that looks really natural without getting too ashy on golden or olive undertone skin. It's the kind of shade that I find very difficult to find, actually. And the thing I love about this formula is that it's very sheer. So it's not gonna give you coverage because the pigment isn't that intense. It's just enough to give you some soft shading. It's neither matte nor dewy. It is just kind of a natural skin finish. This also comes in a great shade range. There are like 8 or 9 different shades from light to very deep with various undertones, so that's fantastic. My summertime contour favorite is the Westman Atelier Face Trace Contour Stick in the shade Truffle. So this, unlike the Danessa Myricks, unfortunately only comes in 2 shades, and this is the middle shade, I think. I think there's Biscuit, Truffle, and then a deeper one. But to be honest, the deep one doesn't go that deep. The shade Truffle is another warm caramel shade. It's definitely a bit deeper and a bit more neutral, less yellowy than the Danessa Myricks one, but that's why this is great for me in the summer. It's like a true caramel brown. And I don't go for too cool toned contours, honestly, because they don't work for my skin tone. With both of these, I actually take a brush and I dip directly either into the pan or I swipe it across the stick and then I apply to my cheeks, and that just gives me the most control. That's generally how I like to apply my cream cheek products. For bronzers, I have both cream and powder, and they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of finish as well as texture. So I fell really hard for the Makeup by Mario, I still don't know the name, it's so long, Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer. I use the shade Medium, and this is called an all-over warming complexion tint. This is very sheer, so it's not going to be your intense bronzer sort of thing. It's almost like a balm texture that melts onto the skin. It does have a bit of like luminous sheen through, like pearliness, not sheen, not glitter, but a bit of pearliness through it. And it is very sheer, even more sheer than the balm contour I just mentioned. But it just gives your skin the most beautiful, sun-kissed, summery, dewy look. It almost looks to me on my skin with this shade like a bronzer, a cream blush, and a liquid illuminator all in one when I have it on, because the light when it hits your face, especially in person, is just stunning. My powder pick is the Make Beauty Skin Mimetic Micro Suede Bronzer. If you can't tell, Make Beauty's makeup releases this year were very strong for me this year. So this is their beautiful magnetic compact. It's refillable, and they came out with, I think, 6 different shades of bronzer from very light to very deep. It was a great range. I use the shade Dune the most, which is the 3rd deepest, I think. It has a really beautiful medium golden undertone, but it's not too warm. It just gives me a perfectly sun-kissed look. And even though this is a powder bronzer, it's so finely milled and refined and velvety that once it's applied to the skin, it just looks like your skin. I know that even people with dry skin like this bronzer, even though it's a powder, because it has that really diffused effect. Moving into blushes, I have both creams and powders, and I'm gonna start with creams. This blush is probably one of my most worn shades of the year, and that's the Phytosurgeon Skin Spark Evaporate Blush. So this is part of their Toasted Blush collection, and if you're not familiar with Phytosurgeons, they're AAPI owned, they're LGBT owned, they're an indie Canadian brand, and they're just so wonderful, and their blush formula is killer. It is a cream blush formula that really stays in place all day. It's sturdy, but it's also very skin-like, and they came out with a Toasted Blush collection, and this shade was in that collection. Formerly, my favorite blush of their line was Smolder, but now it is definitely Evaporate. I use this on my channel a bunch, but I used it in real life even more. It's just the most beautiful, like beigey, peachy, slightly brown shade. It gives you that like sun-kissed peachy look, and on my skin tone, it's perfect. It's like everything I want in a warm toned blush. So I just use this a ton, and for me, I just dip my brush into the pot, stamp it on my cheeks, and it blends out so easily. Another blush formula I used a ton this year are the Rose Ink blushes, and I mostly use the shade Azalea, which is this berry toned blush, but I recently got my hands on the shade Heliotrope, which is a peachy pink, and both of these have been in major rotation, and it hardly looks like I've used them, even though I've had Azalea for over a year now, honestly. These are another easy to use cream blush formula. I just take a brush into the pan and stamp it on my cheeks and blend it out. They stay in place all day long. They don't move around. They don't fade. They don't get patchy. They look slightly glowy and luminous because of the cream finish, but they're not sticky either. This is also a refillable compact, and they also sell the refills separately if you're curious to try them that way. Persona Cosmetics this year came out with their cream blush stick formula. I also really love their bronzer formula in stick form, so I was really excited about this, and I love the shade Teddy. It's actually kind of similar in the same family as Phytosurgence Evaporate. This is Teddy. It's a bit warmer and more orangey, but it was also a really beautiful summer blush. I mean, it's a year-round blush for me, but it looks great in the summer on like sun-kissed skin. Obviously I have a type, but this is also such an easy format. You can just swipe it on, or you can use fingers to pat it out. You can use a brush, you can use a sponge. And again, I just really like easy cream blush formulas. I also love their newest shade. It's called Jam. I used it on Instagram and TikTok. It's another berry toned blush that I think is perfect for winter. I've been saying powder blushes are making a comeback, but in a very refined, skin-like, elegant way. And Gucci released a powder blush formula this year that I really loved, especially this shade. So this is the shade Rosy Beige. It's Gucci, so it has this beautiful weighty compact, and it's just like a little work of art. And there's the shade Rosy Beige. This is a very surprisingly hard pressed powder, but once it's diffused on the skin, it looks really skin-like. It doesn't actually look very powdery, at least not on my skin. I just really love this tone. It's not as warm as I thought it would be on my skin. It's a little bit mauvier, but I kind of like that because it filled a gap in my collection. As you can see, I have a lot of warm blushes. This is like a more neutral blush for my taste that I actually really loved. And another Make Beauty shout out, this is their Skin Mimetic Micro Suede Blush, and this is also a refillable magnetic compact. These are so refined, so smooth, so silky to touch. There is a really cool shade range from light to deep with more natural colors, as well as some really bold pops of color. This is the shade New Moon. It's one of my favorites. I also love Celestial Rose. And yeah, they're just a really refined, elegant formula. They're exactly what I mean when I talk about a refined powder blush formula coming back into style after so many years of cream products. Not that I don't love cream products, but I think there's just a time and place for powder blushes. And after using creams for so long, you kind of forget how easy powder blushes are to blend out. They just require a little bit less blending work, and especially when you have a nice formula like this, it's just easy to use. When it comes to highlighter, I am very much a creature of habit, so my most used highlighter is honestly still Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Filter. The shade 4 is great if you're a light medium olive undertone. It's what I'm wearing now. It's what I wear most days if I'm looking for highlighter, because lately I only want a natural looking highlighter, and I'm just such a creature of habit. I won't talk anymore about this because everyone knows what it is at this point, but I still really love it. The other product that surprised me though is the Milk Makeup Bionic Glow in the shade Virtual. So this is a gel texture highlighter, and it gives you the most beautiful glossiness to the skin without any stickiness. It completely sets down and it's very, very thin. So I tried a lot of balm highlighters this year. I feel like that was a very popular thing. And some of them I do think look really beautiful on the skin. For example, what comes to mind is Merit's, I think it's called Kava. That highlighter stick looks stunning, but doesn't set down on my skin. And for me, as someone with long hair, as someone who wears makeup and is on the go, that's just not a texture I like on my skin most days. So I love that this sets down completely. Virtual has a really nice rosy champagne, beige rosy champagne. But they do have another shade in this as well. The Bionic Glow line in general, I think, was really overlooked this year. I also like the bronzer in this. I like their blushes a lot. They're all a really thin, sheer gel texture, but they look so skin-like and beautiful on the skin. They give you a natural luminosity without adding any weight. Let's get into eyeshadows. I definitely loved a lot of eyeshadow singles this year. You know, I did that recent favorite one and done eyeshadows video. And I overall definitely was a makeup minimalist this year, no less a makeup lover, but I do have a lot of singles that I loved. The standout single eyeshadow that I wore the most is Charlotte Tilbury's Eyes to Mesmerize in the new shade Exaggerize. I mean, I've talked about this so many times. It's just the perfect shimmery, bronzy shade. It has a warm base color, but a super refined, reflective shimmer that runs through it, and it's like a silver shimmer. So it looks wet across the surface of the eye. You can sheer it out, you can build it up, but for me, it's a perfect one and done eyeshadow. It's the most boring of the bunch, but to be honest, it's my most used because that's what I like. I like elevated basics. A new single eyeshadow formula that really surprised me this year was the About Face Fluid Eye Paints. These are the matte fluid eye paints, and I can't get enough of these. My most worn shade is definitely Capulets, which is like a clay sort of brown. I recently did a blue look using this shade called Blue Monday. They're all very opaque with one swipe. They're thin in consistency. They give you enough time to blend them out or create a graphic shape. But once they set down, they do not move, even on my oily eyelids. It's very impressive. A little palette that really surprised me this year is the Linda Hallberg's Cosmetics Shimmer Saga. This is just a quad of topper shades. I've played with this on camera before. There's a yellowy gold, a blue green reflect, a pinky brown duochrome, a purple blue duochrome. They're all very sheer and just super refined shimmers. I love the format of this. I love that it's lightweight, and it was a great way to pop a little bit of color into a look without doing a colorful look. So I could have a really neutral eyeshadow base down, but I could have a little bright pop of an inner corner, a little bright shade across the lid without feeling like I'm wearing like a really bold color. So I think it's a very approachable way of playing with these shimmer toppers in dipping your toe into color. I have two big palettes to discuss, and shockingly, neither of them are Pat McGrath or Natasha Denona. I don't think I bought a single Natasha Denona palette this year, which is kind of shocking to me. And I did review the Pat McGrath Mothership 10, and I was really disappointed by the fact that there were no astral shades, baked astral shades in there. So those are two notable absences on this list, but I did have a couple of other favorites. This one kind of came and went, but it is still in stock in some places, and this was the Byredo, what was this called? The Flora Kalahari palette. This was so beautiful. It is so beautiful. I loved the textures in this. It was elevated neutrals, but also these really beautiful pops of color, these jewel tones. The textures were really refined and creamy and wet looking across the eye. There were metallics, mattes, topper shades. I'm not going to talk about it too long because it is hard to get your hands on, although occasionally it pops in and out of stock. There were a few other large eyeshadow palettes that I liked, like the Patrick Ta eyeshadow palettes. I really liked those this year, but by far the best eyeshadow palette release of the year was the Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 4. This is absolutely a palette for color lovers, for people who like to experiment with makeup, for people who love and live for duochromes and multichromes and shimmery textures and experimentation. It's not a color story for everyone, but these consistencies and textures and formulas are unmatched in my opinion. I did a dedicated video in which I did 8 different eye looks. They were all very colorful eye looks, but I actually have found that these all make great accent shades for if I just want something subtle, but like a pop of something on an inner corner or an outer corner, if I want sort of a defined lash line. There are ways that this palette challenges me to play with color and to experiment and to stay, I don't know, in the world of artistry. So that's it for eyeshadow palettes and eyeshadow singles. For eyeliners, there's only one formula that I wear all the time. It's the formula I'm wearing right now, and that is the Victoria Beckham Beauty Satin Kajal Liner. I did incorporate some new shades into my life this year, so I started wearing, what shade is this? Bordeaux. I started wearing Bordeaux a lot, which is their like wine plummy purple. They also released the shade Fig this year, which is more of a bluish purple. I love the shade Olive, which is a deep emerald green. And they also released their jewel liners. So these are their Kajal liner with shimmers running through them. I especially liked the shade Sequin Green. I did a bold eyeliner look using that. And I think it's the creamiest of the 3 jewel liners that they released. But to me, the reason why I love this is it's creamy, so I'm able to maneuver it and really spend some time perfecting the shape. But once it sets down, it does not smudge. It doesn't move around, it doesn't bleed. I don't wear a lot of makeup in my waterline because I have sensitive eyes, but it doesn't smudge around. Even if I have like teary eyes or something, it doesn't move around. It's perfect. It's everything I want in an eyeliner. For mascaras, there were a ton of mascaras I tried this year that I really loved. I loved the Tom Ford Extreme Mascara. I am really enjoying the Kalahari Come Hell or High Water mascara. That's a tubing mascara. But there was one mascara to rule them all, and it is undeniable. It's the Tower 28 Make Waves mascara. This has been selling out since it was released with good reason. I actually just opened a fresh tube yesterday and I was like, holy shit, this is so good, because it's good the second you open the tube. So I've talked about this a ton. It has a plastic bristle wand, which usually is not my preference, but this wand is perfection. It's slightly curved. It has these really spaced out bristles, and it's so grippy on the lashes. So you're really able to work it into your baby lashes and distribute the product in a really even way that gives you the most fluttery, lightweight kind of finish that does not weigh down my lashes throughout the day. I often find that when I do mascara reviews, I have to qualify that I have Asian lashes. They're very straight, they're very short, and so my mascara needs are pretty specific. But this is a mascara that people with all different lash types have loved. And I've seen reviews, people have told me in person, who all have different lash types, that they love this. It's not your super voluminous mascara at first. It's more of a fluttery, separating, lengthening mascara, and then you can build volume with a second coat. Because I do have very straight, stubborn lashes to hold a curl, my 2 go-to mascara primers are 2 K-Beauty mascara fixers. That's what they call primers. An old favorite, the Peri Para Ink Mascara Fixer, and the Etude House Dr. Mascara Fixer Super Long Lash. So this one actually adds fibers, so it gives me length as well as volume. So if I want a more va-va-voom lash, this is what I go for, but on an everyday basis, this is kind of my standard curl holding mascara primer. My brow routine did not change this year, and I did do a dedicated brow video. I just use the Benefit 24-hour mascara brow setter, 24-hour brow setter, to kind of create a slightly laminated look. And then I fill in my brows with the Milani Weekend Brow Pen in Espresso. I've been doing it this way for over a year consistently, and I just don't need to fix it. It's like, I don't know, brows are not a makeup step that bring me joy. So once I have something I love, I'm very much a creature of habit, and this just really, really works for me. I'll link that video below if you're curious how I use these. Moving on to our final category, which is lips, I want to start with lip liners. I've become a major lip liner convert. I love them. I think they look good with lip balms, they look good with glosses, they look good with lipsticks. They just add a little bit of oomph and definition, and I love how much I'm able to change a makeup look by altering slightly the shape of the lips or the angle of the lips. So there are a few that I use all the time. My most used is the Victoria Beckham Beauty lip liners. You can see mine are quite short and stubby. Shade 1 is my Pinky Peach, and shade 2 is my Brownie Nude. And honestly, if I could only keep 2, if I only kept these, I'd be all set, honestly. They're a wooden pencil liner. I find that they're really long lasting. They're a little bit drier, but they give me the longevity and like the real hold on my lips that I need throughout the day. Another favorite is also a longtime favorite. I've had these forever, the Makeup Forever Artist Color Pencils in the shade Anywhere Caffeine, which is my brownie, beigey, rosy nude, and Endless Cacao, which is a true lip contour shade. So this is a cool tone contour. I actually like to use it with reds as I did today because I find that it really grounds the red, especially once I blend it in with a finger a little bit. It gives you a really sculpted lip shape. And then Tower 28 came out with their one-liners. These are multi-use liners, but I mostly use them for lip liner. These are also a wooden pencil, but they're very creamy. So if you prefer something creamier and a little bit meltier, a little bit shinier even, this is for you. The shade Work of Art is my ideal neutral, slightly browny, rosy shade, but there is a deeper shade and a pinkier shade. This just happens to be my everyday shade. And I can't find it now, but the Rare Beauty lip liner really impressed me as well. That actually surprised me because it's a twist up liner and that's not generally what I could go for, as you can see, but I found it to be super long lasting, very pigmented. I loved the shade range that they came out with this year for their lip liners and their lipsticks. And it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's creamy to apply, but it's also really, really long lasting. And then I'm gonna round it out with lip products from most sheer to most pigmented. So Make Beauty released their Intense serum balms this year. So they had their original serum balms and they released a more intense pigmented version. My most worn is for sure Anti-Gravity. That and Nude Nova Plus. It's just the most beautiful, like warm, rosy toned shade. These are texturally a serum balm. They're not quite as thin as a serum, but they have the balminess that you look for in something that will be comforting and moisturizing on the lips. So it's a perfect purse product because it adds a little tint, but it also moisturizes my lips. And I have one of these honestly in every single bag that I own. Another formula that I think is so underrated is the Rouge Le Balm formula. So Rouge sort of rebranded this year, and so now their makeup line is called Le Fil and Rouge. And they came out with these matte tinted balms that I think are so, so beautiful. I reached for them a ton because they're a waxy matte formula that tints the lips but looks very understated and undone in that cool French girl makeup sort of way. There are 3 shades and they're honestly cool each in their own way. There's Sherry, which is like a wine-stained lip sort of look. There was the shade BB, which is their brownie nude. And there's the shade Shoo Shoo, which is their bright red, but it's like an understated red. Obviously it's bright, but it has a very like blotted lip sort of look. So I love these. I think they're really underrated and I reached for them a ton this year. Undeniably, one of my favorite lip releases and makeup releases in general of 2022 was the Merit lipsticks. I have talked about these a ton. I wear them all the time. They're a sheer natural finish lipstick that looks like a blotted lip again, but these have a little bit more balminess to them, for example, than the Le Balm tinted balms. These are more of a natural finish. So they're a little bit shinier when you apply them and then they set down. My most worn shade for sure is Slip and Cabo. Slip is a brownie nude, Cabo is an orangey red, but recently I've actually really been loving La Avenue, and it kind of surprised me because it's a little bit vampy, but the fact that it's sheer makes this such a wearable brownie berry tone, and I actually think it's a shade that is flattering across so many different skin tones because it has that punch of depth, but again, it's more of a stain than a super pigmented lip look, and I think it's a very cool fall winter sort of shade. Probably my most worn lipstick this year is the Chantecaille Lip Chic, and I can't even tell you which shade because I have so many and I rotate them in and out of my bag all the time. Right now I'm holding the shade Frisia from their Elephant collection. as well as the shade Peach Blossom from their Butterfly collection. They do limited edition runs of these all the time, but they also have a huge permanent collection. And they're all just easy to wear. They're so balmy, so nourishing on the lips, so flattering because they smooth out the lip lines, and so your lips look really plumped up, but they're not overly pigmented, so it's still a really natural kind of look. That is the shade Freesia right there next to La Avenue. You can see just how sheer this formula is. And finally, the most pigmented lipstick that I absolutely fell head over heels for was the Armani Lip Power. This is not a new formula, but this year they released a bunch of new shades, including a lot of different nudes of various depths, and the shade 110 is by far my favorite addition. It is kind of this burnt nude sort of shade. It is definitely, there's like a pink quality to it, but it's also orangey at the same time. And on me, this is a shade that I get a lot of questions about. It's almost this, I don't know, there's like a burnt pink terracotta quality to it. It's a very unnameable shade, but it's been one of my most worn because it just adds a lot of life to my face. And this formula is a satin lipstick. It feels super creamy going on, but then it sets down. You don't feel it at all, but it lasts all day long without looking cakey. It's the weirdest thing. It's so thin, but you don't feel it, but it doesn't look drying. It just stays on all day long. I don't know how it happens, except of course if you're eating something really greasy or something, but it's easy to reapply. I love the teardrop shape lipstick bullet. It makes precision application super easy, and I love it so much that I now have it in 4 different shades. So that is everything for me. That's the best makeup of 2022 in my humble opinion. If there's anything that you were like, Becca, we know you love this product, but I forgot it, let me know in the comments. But more importantly, I would love to hear what your makeup favorites of 2022 have been. Either new releases or things that just really stuck out to you this year. I'm always curious what other people are using. And I also have a skincare video, best skincare of 2022. I have an upcoming video for hair care, body care, fragrance, maybe fashion, we'll see. It was honestly a really great year for beauty. I'm excited to see what's ahead in 2023. Thank you so much for watching this whole video. If you got this far, I love you for it. I would love also for you to subscribe so we can do this again. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.